Hello, hi everyone. Call me Gabby Cach. I'm really excited and like to take the time to also thank Campus Life Committee for this opportunity. And I'm super excited to just share with you about my experience here at Carnegie Mellon. For me, when I was thinking about what topics just to give on, I think for me it was more so concept of success and success at Carnegie Mellon, since we always give ourselves a hard time just, having these high expectations. And I'm just here to kind of share my story and just tell you that your journey, no matter where you go, will be very successful. So how do you define success? If we go on and ask Merriam-Webster, they would give you the definition that success is a desirable or favorable outcome. And while I sort of agree with this definition, I think it really doesn't embody everything an individual would identify as being successful. So I also looked at to see what successful people have said about their definitions. And if you go, and so Bill Gates will tell you that success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. And Stephen Richards would say the true measure of success is how many times you can bounce back from failure. Lastly, Michelle Obama will tell you that success isn't about how much money you make. It's about the difference in the people's lives you impact. Although, these definitions and perspectives are really good, one common theme among these people is that they all have individualized their own definition, and that's essentially the definition I was trying to find myself at Carnegie Mellon. But to give you guys some background, my life at CMU was much more like a roller coaster. I can't even explain to you the ups and downs, and that I'm pretty sure many of you guys can all attest to that, but that's also life. And as much as I tried planning my life around it, there are always some setbacks and challenges and failures that I think have made me the person I am today. But also, my background, so just to give you guys perspective, I'm originally from Los Angeles, and my parents immigrated from Guatemala to the U.S. back in the 90s. I've wanted to be an engineer since 7th grade, and I'm also the first in my family to graduate college soon in May, which is very exciting. Thanks. So basically with this, I came to Carnegie Mellon figuring out really truly what was success, what was that definition for me. So as I mentioned before, I'm a fifth year, and that wasn't originally the plan when I first entered. I was class of 2017. But just to give you also my academic experiences here, I really struggled since my freshman year just in my academic courses. And that was just something that I had to kind of cope with, not saying necessarily that's what everyone aspires to do, but I also refused to tell people or to call people myself dumb. I didn't like the idea that others viewed me like that, and I also wanted to make sure that in the future that just wasn't the concept for me. And I also am definitely no Einstein. I'm not even trying to be Einstein, and that's super okay. Many of us, some Carnegie Mellon students would want to be Einstein, and that's perfectly fine too, but that's just not for me. And I can just sit here and tell you about my freshman year, sophomore year, and all the different challenges, but really I think one of the pivot points for me was junior year. I had already failed a class. I was on the verge of failing another class. I was having somewhat also an identity crisis. I was just going through a rough patch. And for me, it got to the point where I had to sit down, calm, and kind of think about where I wanted to go in life. And that was also thinking about, okay, maybe potentially taking an additional year to actually complete my engineering curriculum, which is something that not many students would like to think about. For me, I was a little hesitant about that because coming in, I was set on graduating 4 years, but that didn't necessarily turn out the way I had expected. And it's something that I think I just in general struggled with, because I didn't want my peers to be like, well, you probably were, I don't know, you lacked. And no, not necessarily. It just took me some time. My timeline was different. My timeline was on a 5-year, not a 4-year based. But with all this, I just wanted to kind of say that that academics didn't necessarily identify or made me this person. I just want to say that a lot of people struggle with their academics, but at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily define who they are. So when I was making this decision, I was analyzing the pros and cons. I could graduate in 4 years. I could have actually, but it was also, I didn't want to graduate just barely making it, because I felt like that just was unacceptable, and that was an expectation that I had of myself. So, at the end of the day, although it took me maybe a few months, I decided to take this extra year to fulfill my engineering curriculum. And that was, I guess, a pivoting point for me, just because I knew I would not be with my class. And in general, grades were a big thing, and I knew that I was more capable than anything of accomplishing more. So when I took this decision, I really wanted to make this year worthwhile, making it just not only, obviously finishing my engineering curriculum, but also ensuring that I've left Carnegie Mellon with stronger skills, actually making it worth it. And so with this, I honestly am very proud that there was a point where throughout I had achieved a really high GPA throughout this entire year. I was not taking engineering courses, and that was a super happy year for me, because I realized that I was able to actually perform well, and that made me really happy. But I also wanted to point out that although I didn't finish, or I took this extra year, I didn't really look at it as a failure. I looked at it as a setback, because for me, it was more so I'm still accomplishing, at the end of the day, graduating from this university with an engineering degree. It just took me a while. It took me that extra year. And yeah, so I also, making that extra year, I made sure that I would challenge myself with different involvements on campus. So one of them being student government. I had always held positions more in like smaller organizations, and I think for me, it was more like, okay, where can I grow, what area? And so that's when this vice president for finance position in student government kind of kept me interested. And it was a very fun experience. I think campaigning was definitely something that I struggled with initially, but at the end of the day, I ended up, that was like a whole different experience. But yeah, I just made sure that everything that I did, even made some new friends, and I think that's really what made my extra year here worth it. And so I think, although this is like my story, everyone in here has their own story, and kind of the 3 key points that I want to share with you that should take away from this, although I'm like going on a rant, is that the first one is that only you know what you're capable of. Like, no one else should be telling you what you can or can't do. That's something that I've learned here at Carnegie Mellon. I've had experiences with an advisor saying, hey, maybe you should just not do engineering, but that just wasn't an option for me, and I kept striving to ensuring that I would graduate. I worked so hard since 7th grade thinking that I would graduate in 4 years, but like I mentioned before, everyone has their timeline, everyone has their own journey and process, and I think that what you should be thinking about is that you shouldn't necessarily be comparing yourselves to other people. Although it's a benchmark, I think at the end of the day, it's really everyone has their own process to get there. And the second point is that just because you didn't accomplish something at the time you expected doesn't necessarily mean it's a failure. It's always, for me, it's always a setback. And the final one is always remain positive with your journey. I think for me, one of the things that I've learned is also just remain positive. I think if we look at the negative, it just brings you down so much more, and there's really no need to be looking at that. There's always a bright side to everything. And for me, although I didn't graduate in 4 years, I'm super excited now to be graduating and just sharing a new chapter in my life. So those are the 3 key points that I definitely want you guys to take away from this lecture. And you know, when we're talking about success here, we're talking about just like these other 2 elements, like where I've talked a lot about what others think and what I think of myself. And that's also about reputation and character. Reputation is more about, okay, what others perceive you, and character is really about, okay, well, how do you portray yourself? And like, you can just put the next one. So I think with this, I want to balance out. It's really important to understand which one is most important to you, and I think that will help you on your journey. Do you go to the next one? So essentially from here, as I mentioned, reputation is important for sure. It's the ability for people to kind of view how you are or who you are as a person and judge you. You know, that's like your network connections, because that's how you enter corporate America. People will talk about you, and that's, you know, kind of your reputation. And the other one was character, you know, how you interact with people, how you view yourself, and just like yourself and your personality. And I think that is very important. But for me, along this journey, it's really hard to kind of balance both. And you can't really balance both the entire time. Sometimes there will be events that just hit you, and you know, you'll find an unbalance, and that's when you have to decide, kind of pick and choose which is more important to you. It's reputation or your character. So essentially for me, what I've learned is that always choose character over reputation, because that is really choosing yourself over what others think of you. And I think that has also led me to a much happier place at Carnegie Mellon, in life, with friends. You know, I can't stress how much people nowadays care about what others think of them, and that's just not necessarily always the case, because if you do, then you're just, you know, pleasing everyone else and not necessarily yourself. So yeah, and I think from this, this will bring you definitely success, choosing yourself over what others think of you. Thank you.